It's been 3 weeks. We've had a nice little break from the end of the fantasy basketball season, but it's about time we start gearing up for the NBA draft, preparing for what we're going to do in our Dynasty draft. So we got a Dynasty big board for you today. Welcome to the Angle Fantasy Basketball Podcast. I'm your host, Andrew. I am joined by one of my colleagues over at Angle, Mitchell. How are you today, dude?
Doing great. NBA basketball, NBA playoff basketball is here. Just went to the Laker game I think it was Tuesday. And, it was nice to see KD and LeBron go at it. First time in the playoffs since 2018. And LeBron put on a show, man. He carried the team on his back with the help of Luke Kennard, or should I say Luka Kennard. Dude was just draining threes, hitting mid ranges, and then Marcus Smart, my God, he had like 5 threes too. So
Right.
things are looking really, really good for your Lakers. And Austin Reeves is questionable, who people thought, oh, he's not even gonna play this series. So
Right.
this is almost a death sentence for Houston.
And I got a big smile on my face right now because, as Mitch alluded to, I am a Lakers fan. I was very jealous of the game that you went to, and am honestly surprised. I thought Houston would roll us without, our main two guys, Reeves and Luka, being out. But LeBron stepping up big time. The team's on his back right now, and of course with Smart and Kennard stepping up. And there's been some troubles for Houston, obviously with KD hurt in the first game, and then. I do have that signed Şengün jersey behind me, and that's mostly for Dynasty. I had him on a Dynasty team, really liked him as a player, but watching kind of some of the things get exposed in the playoffs and then the memes of him on Twitter has been both tough and hilarious to watch. But let's talk about some guys who are not yet in the NBA. So on our website, anglefantasybasketball.com, our version 3 of our big board is out. That's what we're going to be discussing today. So main new caveats here. We have expanded this big board from 20 to 30. Again, this big board is focused to Dynasty basketball, 9-category Dynasty basketball. So we're not necessarily talking real life here, but obviously that does apply in many scenarios because we want to make sure these guys actually are good enough to get on the court in the first place. And then we talk about their 9-cat stat set from there. We have the 10 new players, and then obviously due to the 10 new players, there's new tier breaks introduced. We have some guys that have moved around a little bit, and then mostly what we're going to focus on today is the new additions, especially because we are going to be doing a collab soon with some other Dynasty guys, so we want to save some of those big discussions for them. So before we get into that, we aren't going to spend too much time on like the top of the lottery prospects here because we have discussed them already, and our tier 1 didn't change. It's still the same: Boozer, Debanza, Peterson, in that order. I think there's no debate there between you and I, Mitchell. But we can spend a little bit of time here in tier 2 because one change we did is the last time we did have Darius Akov at 5 and Flemings at 6. That's still the same. However, we have Akov and Caleb Wilson in the same tier now at tier 2, and then there's a break to tier 3 beginning with Kingston Flemings at 6. But we talked about this before we started recording, Mitch. And our last big board, we didn't spend a little bit of that much time at all, honestly, on Caleb Wilson. And I think the last big board we did was more recently to when he got hurt. But now that the season's over, we have time to really start thinking back on what he did, preparing for evaluating him for the draft process. So do you have some thoughts you wanted to share on Wilson really quickly?
Yeah, with Caleb Wilson, there is some rumblings that, after Debanza, who's pretty much projected to be the clear number 1 pick in real life, Caleb Wilson is kind of seen as the second best prospect to some GMs. And a lot of reports, I know Kevin O'Connor is hearing things about Caleb Wilson making that jump. It could be the Sacramento Kings. I don't know. That could be a King thing where they take the non-consensus pick a little bit early. It could happen, but
it could.
Like I want to, Caleb Wilson is a great prospect in its own right, and a lot of dynasty drafts happen after the real rookie draft. So, of course, team placement is going to play a key factor on how we kind of reshape these tiers and the rankings right before dynasty drafts, right? Because after the rookie drafts in real life, team placements definitely play a big factor on our projections on how they're going to excel, at least in that 2 to 3 year window where we really like to key in for our dynasty ranks. So, Andrew, if Caleb Wilson, the projected 4 or 5 guy on most boards, if he gets put up and gets selected number 2 or even number 3 over Darren Peterson or Cam Boozer, is he a tier 1 prospect for you?
Okay, trying to think of teams like, because obviously we want it to be the best fit. You mentioned Sacramento earlier. There's a lot of non-shooters in that front court, so that's not. I mean, they can maybe try to make it work, but it's not ideal.
Or they move Sabonis, who's
Of
kind of been
course.
rumored on the trade block. I like that because Reynaud not being a defensive presence, and the interior Caleb Wilson, really compensates for his deficiency. So it could be like a offense defense type of duo where Wilson and Reynaud, because Reynaud can kind of stretch the floor a little bit too, or it could work out. And especially as they pivot towards a more youth-centric future, man, Wilson and Reynaud could be cool. But yeah, a lot of dominoes would have to fall with like trading Sabonis as well.
I feel like I like Wilson if he went to Brooklyn. That would be good.
Yeah.
That would be solid. Who else is going to be up towards the top there? I've seen some people think that the Heat have a chance, like in the lottery. Would that work though next to Bam? Potentially. I know they have Wiggins as their power forward right now, though. And then teams like the Pacers, like Siakam's a power forward, but if they're trying to run lineups without Zubac on the floor, you'd think they want both, Zubac to play a lot. They did just risk actually having their top 5 pick to get him. So, like, let's say, if he would have to fall to 5 in this scenario, but let's say the Clippers end up picking at 5 and Wilson is there. I don't hate that fit in LA, especially because Kawhi can play small forward instead. Yeah. So there's a lot of good possibilities here. Yeah, there's a lot of good possibilities for Wilson. There's actually not that many like bad scenarios. Maybe only if like the Pacers get that pick,
or the Wizards,
yeah,
or the Jazz too. Jazz are stacked at the front court as well.
Yeah, that's true. The Jazz's front court at least has more shooting available in it, so there is that whole aspect of it that does help. But you are right. Maybe the Kings would shift things around to make it work for a prospect of, Wilson's value. They might just, be tired of the Domantas Sabonis saga, might move on from him, and maybe it's Caleb Wilson's time instead. I don't want to, assume that an NBA franchise is going to make a major move like that. But like we alluded to, there is some good fits for him out there in the top end of the draft. Okay, so we're going to move on from Wilson. And when we do, one thing that we wanted to discuss, because this was a question brought up to us on Twitter from shout out to 10th Cat. And this is between Akov and Flemings, because I think rightfully so, a big debate is going to be between that who's at 5 and who's at 6, because the top 4 feel really safe. And right when you get to 5 is where there might be some flaws or questions kind of introduced there. So for Akov and Flemings, the question that was asked to us is who has the higher floor between the two? I answered back to him and I said Flemings, due to like if both of them hit like a mid to low end outcome, they both don't work out. We would expect Flemings is going to be at least good to be like a steal streamer in a 9 category league at the least. Would you agree with that, Mitch?
Yeah, more like a Kason Wallace if the offense never really develops or he's not really a focal point. Like if he's more of like a defensive specialist, where he certainly can be as the floor, Kason Wallace is still arguably a top 100 asset, and taking someone the 6th pick to get a top 100 asset is pretty damn good, especially if the offense develops. He has that top 60 upside potentially when he hits his prime.
We can, of course, focus on the ceiling here because Akov doesn't really have that defensive side of him to save his value if we hit a mid to low outcome. But the ceilings is where things get more interesting. And I'm not saying this is for sure going to happen or will happen. But like the highest outcome possible scenario for both of them, like an NBA comparison of what they could potentially do with their stat set. A point I brought up was Akov reminds me of like a Damian Lillard, and I think has potential to play like him. This is someone who was a first-round pick sometimes during his prime. He would usually be picked at the back end of a 12-team league or one of the first picks in round 2. Whereas Flemings reminds me stats head-wise of like a Mike Conley, who again is like, if you look back to his prime, like sites like Basketball Monster have historical 9-cat data. Conley had his seasons in the top 30 as well. So ceiling-wise for both of them, looking at it in Dynasty for 9-cat, there is top ceiling or top 30 upside for both, and potentially top 15, top 12 upside for Akov too. If we're talking best case scenario, everything works out, and possibly even more than what we expect for the both of them. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and I think the big selling point with Akov versus like a Trey Young, the size difference is quite apparent. Trey Young was like 165 pounds at 6'3". Akov is like 200 or so pounds. Like he's a pretty stocky, he's a big boy. He has that more of a football type frame. And also, unlike Trey Young, Akov is really good off the ball. Like he could play off ball with, you know, navigating through screens. He could back cut. Like he has that. I don't want to say like the Steph Curry element to him as like a kind of a primary playmaker, but also he could play off ball. But he has that type of skill set where he doesn't have to be on the ball to be productive, and it definitely helps that he is very efficient. I believe he went like almost 50, 40, and 80 for this season in terms of shooting split. So I love the upside with Akov. Yes, the defense is a concern, but you know, if you have a top 5 pick, I'd rather gamble it on a guy who can potentially average 26 to maybe 30 points in his prime, because you're not going to get that outside of the top 5 in this draft.
Yeah, the scoring upside does drop down a little bit. I mean, we got guys like Wagler and Mikael Brown who can definitely score in their own right. But we have more questions about them than we do about Akov, or of course the big dogs up in the top 3, Caleb Wilson as well. So that we're not going to spend too much time in the top 6. We'll probably close out that aspect there. But one thing you mentioned weight with Akov, and there's a couple of like issues with this draft class I want to talk to you about, and it is relevant more so to the back end of the lottery and onwards. There is a good amount of top guards in this draft who, at least in regards to the combine, might weigh in like 180 pounds or less than 190 pounds. And, obviously someone who's more in like the 205 range, like Akov, we love to see that. There's obviously really big guys like Boozer, who's probably like 240 or something around there. But guys like Wagler, Brown, LeBaron Phelan, Christian Anderson, Cameron Carr, even Ibuka Okori, who we're going to be discussing soon too. A lot of really slender frames in this draft class. I mean, it is. I've seen some people bring this up as a concern, and like there is obviously a reason why point guard is the hardest position for rookies to adjust to. And I would consider obviously size for that one reason. Point guards are typically around 6'2" to 6'4", and we have a ton of freshmen at the top of this draft. So we're talking a 6'2", 6'4", 19 to 20-year-old. It's not a huge shock that a lot of them are going to weigh around that 185 weight range. Obviously, as they grow into men, they will, hit 200 and above. But does that concern you at all that there's kind of some slight frames here? Because this is a very deep and rich point guard class. There's no doubt about that. But does that frame issue worry you at all for any of these guys?
Some guys definitely look like they're gonna be on the slender side. Even moving into their careers, like a Cameron Carr. He kind of fits the mold of like a Devin Vassell, but he could be wiry strong. We just don't know yet. But guys like Mikael Brown, Keaton Wagler, very early in their careers, I feel like because they have broad shoulders, they could eventually fill up their frame, but the shooting splits, especially at the rim, may not look so pretty, especially for a point guard with the slender frame. So I think, given with the nature of time, their frame should fill up, and I'm not too concerned because this definitely is a special class.
Mm-hmm. Now, another issue that we're experiencing with this class, and this is mostly relevant to outside of the lottery, but we did have one guy previously in our top 14 and top 20 who got eliminated, and another guy who was only in our top 20, not in our first version of the top 14, who got eliminated. Is these guys going back to school. So obviously there's some pretty tempting NIL offers out there. Yeah, there's temptations as well, because these schools that we're discussing here are Duke, Florida, and UConn. So there's temptation to want to go back and try to win a national championship. I totally get that. But we are now missing Patrick Ngongba, Braylon Mullins, Those were two guys that were on. Well, Ngongba was on both version 1 and version 2. Mullins made it on to version 2. They are both now off our big board because they're returning to school. And then we first released this on Monday, and like an hour later, Thomas Hope announced that he's returning to Florida. So, I mean, we weren't super hyped on him anyways, but we had to take him off and replace him with somebody else. And that's something you might see us do a couple more times because especially over these next couple of weeks, there might be some of these guys who end up returning to school. So definitely keep that in mind that obviously as we approach, especially once our final versions come out in June, those are the guys that are for sure going to stay in the draft. And another thing to keep in mind, if you see word that somebody entered the transfer portal, that's not supposed to be a big red flag. It is possible to simultaneously declare for the draft and enter the transfer portal. If anything, I don't blame any of these guys. Even if a top prospect like Boozer did it, I don't blame any of them because it's a way to protect yourself. If you don't end up getting drafted, you're at least in the transfer portal. You can try to find some type of lucrative NIL deal there for yourself, because there is some guys in here where they could have very lucrative offers from top schools to return, or even guys who aren't on our big board right now, like Luigi Fuigo, that the 7'4" center from Italy, who did declare for the draft, but probably more likely might play in the NCAA. But if he sticks in this draft cycle, maybe he gets to the combine and makes some noise. You'll definitely see him start to get included in these big boards here. Let's quickly focus on number 9 and 10, Mitch, before we move in deeper. Braden Burries. And I think we're going to focus on these two guys due to deep NCAA tournament runs. They really showed a lot. Burries especially. Both of these guys made it to the Final Four. One of them that you will be discussing next was a national champion. And I love just the hustle, the basketball IQ that Burries shows. Even though he's not, a 20-point per game guy, he was a really rock solid contributor offensively the entire year. He had over 600 points this year as a freshman. The only other Arizona Wildcat that has done that as a freshman is former number 1 overall pick DeAndre Ayton. So I love the profile from rebounding as well, a great connective passer, and he's got some steals to his game too. So definitely someone I'm now considering in top 10. He was at, I think, maybe 15 for us in version 2. So he definitely bumped himself up a good amount due to his NCAA tournament play. And I think we're going to see that being further solidified with the combine. He now sits comfortably in tier 3, along with another new addition to tier 3 who has moved up, Adai Mara, who we have as a top 10 evaluation for 9-cat Dynasty leagues. Care to elaborate on that, Mitch?
Yeah, Mara is really the first center, traditional center on our big board that we recommend you take if you're looking for a center in your upcoming rookie draft. So the big appeal of Mara is the size, right? He doesn't play too many minutes. I feel like he only played 24 minutes or 25 minutes per game for Michigan this year, but he put up some ridiculous lines, especially for the blocks. You're thinking of potentially like a Donovan Clingan, right? Donovan Clingan didn't have great rebounding stats in college because he was kind of suppressed in terms of his workload and minutes. Daimara, if you look at his per 36, he's crushing it, right? He's going to give you 10 rebounds a game if he ever gets that conditioning up, similar to like how we've seen Clingan evolve over his first 2 years in the NBA, right? He's not like a Zach Edey who has unlimited cardio, but there's a lot of nuances in Amara's game that I really like, quite honestly. I was really impressed with his hands. He was able to catch so many lobs from maybe not the most accurate passes, right? And it's just entirely impressive, whether it was like a lob for a layup or a lob dunk, off balance. He just has really great footwork overall, some hidden passing ability. And if you're not in the market for a point guard, take him as high as number 6 because he's probably going to stay as the top big, at least for me. Andrew, I know you like Steinbach a lot too, but personally, I love the block numbers that Mara provides. It's one of the hardest stats to achieve, especially in today's NBA where so many players are shooting threes. Even Victor's blocks were suppressed because a lot of teams aren't going into the paint anymore. I think the second highest blocks per game was Chet. I think just under 2. The league is trending towards that direction. So if you can get a defensive anchor that can get you that upside of 2 blocks a game with some scoring, with some passing, I love Mara at this spot. And I think he's going to continue to develop because he made a big jump from UCLA if given the right opportunity. So hopefully we see that trajectory continue for Adeyemara.
All right, let's move on to the back half of the lottery here. Start getting into the 20s. Really quickly, Mitch, you the other day gave me a pretty good NBA comparison, either stat set wise or real player wise, for Cameron Carr. And we'll probably go into more detail with him on a future podcast, but let's hear that comparison for Cameron Carr really quick because I thought it was pretty good.
Yeah, Cameron Carr, similar size to Devin Vassell, really long wingspan, just like Vassell too. Has great on-ball chops like Vassell, but also is malleable enough to become that third option. So like very early in the career, Devin Vassell was kind of seen as that guy before like Victor, a lot of those other guys like Stephon Castle coming into fray. And Carr shows similar upside in terms of scoring. He's a great self-creator, but because of his efficiency at the three-point line and his defensive potential, especially with the blocks, with his 7'2" wingspan, something that I love to see, especially because it is out of position for a shooting guard small forward. He has good steal numbers relatively, and the efficiency is nice. So he is pretty much a Swiss Army knife, similar to Devin Vassell. And I think, when you're building a championship contender, you're always going to want that guy who can self-create in moments when called upon, but also be a really good off-ball shooter who doesn't need to rely a lot on touches for him to be productive.
Now, another guy that both you and I are starting to become a little more infatuated with. He was not on version 2. He's made it onto version 3 and is on the back end of our lottery. Now, this is a disclaimer. If this guy stays in the NBA draft cycle and chooses to get drafted, because this is someone where he just played for Stanford last year. He could have UCLA come knocking on his door, or Kansas, Florida, UConn, Duke, North Carolina. Any one of these teams would love to have Ibuka Okori on their roster next year. He is a freshman. He is a little undersized, so if he wanted to stay for a little more seasoning in the end of NCAA, I would not blame him. But for right now, we believe he is going to be potentially in this draft cycle, and if he lets us know otherwise, we're going to keep him on this big board for now. We have him at 14 at the moment, and I think a reason why is because he is a very special scorer, and he did this without really a lot of people realizing this. I mean, maybe you can blame it to the fact that he's playing for Stanford. It's not like they're in the Pac-12 anymore, completely different division nowadays, so they get less eyeballs on them. They're not playing UCLA, USC all the time anymore. But on Stanford, who has produced some okay prospects recently, we got Maxime Reynaud from them last year, 23 points a night for a freshman on that Stanford team. They usually have been relying on their upperclassmen to provide a ton of offense for them. But Okori, he did have a lot of other scoring options, or who were supposed to be primary 1 and 2 scoring options on the team, but he was still dropping 23 points a night anyways. So there wasn't a ton of, despite being a point guard, we're not looking at, maybe the type of assists that a Christian Anderson can provide or a Bennett Sturts can provide, but the level of scoring that this kid is able to generate, as well as the free throw attempts, is what has us interested. What are your thoughts on Okori really quick, Mitch?
I think he's great. If it wasn't for Debanza, correct me if I'm wrong, he'd be the leading scorer as a freshman this season in college. And, watching clips of him and tape, he's so crafty. Like, he can break you down on an island. He can get you buckets in all 3 levels, right? At the rim, mid-range, pretty efficient from 3. There is that hesitancy on from like a playmaking aspect as an undersized guard. So there are concerns that maybe he's more just a microwave scorer, if he's not the primary ball handler or focal point in the offense, right? That is the scary part, but I think he's efficient enough where he can potentially make his way into a starting caliber point guard who's running the flow of the offense. So I think with time, I don't think he's necessarily a selfish player. He's shown flashes for, his playmaking chops. I just didn't think that Stanford team was very good on the offensive end, similar to, that Rutgers team with Dylan Harper. Dylan Harper's assist numbers are pretty mediocre too, but seeing on the San Antonio Spurs, he's averaging almost 4 to 5 a game on a winning team in limited numbers. So I wouldn't look too into those assist numbers, but Just a little bit of a caution. Other than that, I love the scoring, Andrew. Like, it's so hard. Like, he can continue to be a riser, especially if teams select him in the lottery. Just gives you more reassurance and confidence that they see him as a at least a secondary scoring option.
Mm.
And I, just watching clips of him, he's just so much fun. And
Yeah,
part of fantasy is like just drafting players you like to watch, right?
right. I definitely recommend watching the tapes on him if you haven't already. And if he does continue on with this draft process, you and I aren't going to be shocked if we learned he dropped, 22 points in the first combine scrimmage or something along those lines. So keeping a close eye on Okori. Now, let's get down this list a little bit here. And a couple guys we wanted to discuss. Someone who is not on the last list that is now inside of our top 20. Kareem Lopez. I would consider this more of a re-emergence because people are aware of Kareem Lopez. There's been interest in him for a while, but since he has been playing overseas, it's kind of easy to forget. However, for the New Zealand Breakers, he had an excellent year as a 19-year-old. And in that Australian league, the NBL, they don't like there has been these young prospects who are going to be a first round pick in the NBA that just choose to play over there instead of the NCAA. And they don't have an obligation to play those young guys. In fact, they do prefer to play their veterans because they're trying, to win the NBL championship out there too. So examples is like Alex Sarr. Alex Sarr did not play that many minutes per night when he was over in the NBL. And that was part of the main concern that you and I would discuss back during that draft cycle is, well, we don't have a ton of, evidence to go on because he didn't play heavily. Another example is Jock Landale from this last draft cycle. He barely got on the floor, but Kareem Lopez was playing over 20 minutes a night for the Breakers. He in regards to 9 categories, seems to be one of these guys who can do a little bit of everything because on this team, he averaged the 1-1-1, which for us in 9 cat, we love that. 1 3, 1 block, 1 3-pointer per game. He did that as a 6'8" wing. Decent scoring, nothing crazy, 11 points per night, but 6 rebounds, 2 assists. This is a full stat line we're talking here. So 71% from the line. I have to mention that as well. Over 30% from 3, 50% from the field. So doesn't look like his percentages are going to kill you. He's not going to be a 60% free throw shooter. And it looks like he's pretty good from the floor too. So someone who's not going to hurt your percentages and is going to do a little bit of everything on the counting stats. We love that. And we also love the likelihood of him getting drafted and being on the floor a ton because he is a 6'8" wing with good size, especially on the weight end too. He's one of the bigger wing prospects that we have. There's not a whole lot of wings coming out of this first round. We have a lot of point guards and centers so far, or point guards and power forwards more accurately, I would say, is kind of what this draft has been so far. So one of these classic wing type players is not that easy to come by, but Lopez, in my opinion, is one of the best ones. And he's drafted or mocked, I should say, like just outside of the lottery. I've seen him actually mocked to like the Lakers, for example. So if he goes to a team who's maybe middling or trying to win and needs a wing, because most of those types of teams do, then I love that outlook for fantasy wise. Even if he's not on a tanking team, he's on a winning team instead. I really think one of those teams will play him because we've seen that evidence of a professional NBL team giving him over 20 minutes a night. Mitch, you mentioned that Nate Ament probably needs another year in college. He did drop down our big board a little bit, not necessarily due to his own fault, but more because we needed to insert other guys above him like Okori and Lopez. But anything you wanted to add on Nate before we move on?
Yeah, I think he really should have stayed in college one more year to fill out his frame, get a little bit stronger because he's going to get punished in the NBA. Like he's theoretically, right, a 6'10" wing who can handle the ball, but these guys in the NBA are a whole different animal, right? And if you're getting pushed around in college, what do you think is going to happen in the NBA? And if his ball handling doesn't develop, is he another Risa, right? A guy, number 1 pick, he's not even playing, getting off the bench, getting coaches DNPs in the playoffs, and even in leading into the end of the tail end of the regular season, where Nate Ament projects very similar in terms of like a stat set as well. So, I mean, at the very least, like there is that upside of some self-creation that Risa didn't have, but I'm not entirely confident with Nate Ament. But I think if you want one of the younger prospects and a flyer, I think he's fine in the late teens, early 20s range where, hey, maybe if it pans out, go for it. But definitely don't recommend taking him in the mid to late lottery where he could be projected in real life, because we're thinking from a dynasty fantasy basketball lens, and he does not have the most attractive stat set. So buyer beware.
So like us with our 2024 big board, never had Riche in the top 10 in it. Maybe like 9 or 8 at most, but I'm pretty sure we never had him in our top 10. And and obviously for 9-cat perspective, obviously, worked out in our favor because we knew guys like Alex Sarr were going to have a better stat set than him, despite him being the #1 pick. So that's why the guys are arranged in this order. This is all for Dynasty 9-cat, and we just don't really know what to expect out of a mint. He's a little bit of a mystery box, but probably somebody who should have stayed in school.
Talking about mystery box, we added Jaden Quaintance.
We did.
He's the
we had to add him eventually.
Right. And like quick discussion on him. Quaintance, he tore his ACL, I believe, his freshman season at Arizona State. He put up some really good numbers, similar to like what you'd expect from like a Time Lord, a defensive anchor, a little bit undersized, but really quick twitch type of guy who's very explosive as an athlete. Second year, riddled with injuries. Didn't see much of him at University of Kentucky, but we thought that because of the blocks upside, we had to include him here at 21 and give him a first round rank. Andrew, I feel like we're more on the conservative side here. We're not totally bought in, but we still see the upside. So that's pretty much why we're still including him as a first round grade.
Yeah, because there are some guys that are mocked really high that we don't even have on this big board. Shout out to Koa Pete. So we at least had to put Quaintance on here because there is that intrigue. You obviously have to look at his first year at, I believe it was Arizona State. You got to look at that more because he did not really play for Mark Pope at all this year. So that's what we have to go off of. And really, this whole conversation might change due to the combine. If he's healthy for that, shows out, freak athletic measurables and does some good stuff during the scrimmages, then you might see him bump up for us. But right now, we're taking this very conservatively, worried about what exactly we're getting here. But there is a couple guys I want to direct all of your attention to. They come right after Quaintance on this list. Dalen Swain. You might not have heard of him, but he was one of the best players for Texas this year. For 9-cat, this is one of my favorite guys, especially because this is a 6'8" power forward, and an indicator that we try, or a lot of people, I should say, try to look at is free throw attempt rate. And Swain's free throw attempt rate is right up there with some of the guys who are in our top 10, right up there with Burrays, for example, Keaton Wagler, those types of guys. He's attempting around 5 free throws a night, Swain was. And that is something that you really like to see, his ability to draw fouls. And even as a wing, he was converting 81% from the line while still shooting 54% from the floor because most of his attempts were around the rim. He didn't really attempt that many threes. He was decent at them. That's probably something that I would say is still a work in progress. But the fact that we have the good shooting from the floor, shooting from the free throw line, getting to the free throw line often, and in addition to that, 17 points, 7 rebounds, 3 assists, 1.6 steals per night. So we're getting a little bit of everything in the stat set. And it's not like a Kareem Lopez where it's like, okay, his percentages are decent, but they're not going to hurt you. It's these percentages might boost you. He might boost your field goal percentage. He might boost your free throw percentage. In addition to chipping in points, rebounds, assists, maybe some steals. So we really loved these guys in the 20s, even if they might end up getting drafted in the second round. We put them up in the 20s anyways. This is kind of a range you and I like to have a lot of fun in here, Mitch. So Swain is definitely one of those. Someone I want you all to keep a very close eye on. Another one, Alan Graves, coming in right after him at 23. I kicked myself because we could have seen him play at LMU in LA this year. We missed that opportunity. Even I think like Ben Pfeiffer went to that one. It was kind of one of these, YouTube NBA guys that we like to follow. But an interesting stat I saw about Graves, this was tweeted by the NBA draft analyst John Wasserman. Graves is one of 2 players over 6'8" with a 4.9 steal percent rate, which means per 100 possessions, he is getting a steal on about 5 of them. He also has, that doesn't sound like much, but I promise you that is a really good steal rate. He also has a really good offensive rebounding rate too. So he is not, a self-creator, and I would like to see him be a better connective passer as well. But this is somebody who I think can fit really well in the NBA due to showing his ability to stretch the floor and shoot. The catch and shoot skill is there, and the work rate in regards to offensive rebounding. And then someone who's going to be that size, like, it's pretty rare that we see a forward in an NBA or a 9 category perspective that's putting in over like 1.5 steals a night, for example. It's normally guards that do that for us. Or maybe you get like a Dyson Daniels last year who had forward eligibility for a bit and was putting up, crazy steals numbers. So if we're getting a pretty big sized wing, someone considered a power forward with, well north of 1 steal per night, that's some great value that we like to see coming out of what's likely going to be the back end of the first round. But this is also somebody with very likely some very rich NIL offers. So we're going to see if he ends up staying. So those are some 2 interesting wings there, Mitch. Anything you wanted to add on them, or maybe you want to talk about Tunde? Anybody else in this range here?
Yeah, I'll talk about Tunde. So talk about a physical specimen, right? 6'5", 215 pounds. He pretty much looks like a physical clone of Anthony Edwards. He doesn't play like Anthony Edwards, right? I mean, similar shot mechanics, but not saying that he's the next Anthony Edwards. However, he's a menace on the defensive end. He averages 2 steals a game. Shooting splits are not there, but they're not completely bad. I think he's at like 46. The 3-point shot isn't there yet at 29%, 75% from the free throw line. Decent rebounds, negative assist to turnover ratio. He has a bit of tunnel vision. But speaking of raw upside, Tunde Yesufu could be a steal of the draft if you can get him in the late 20s, mid 20s, especially because of those steal upside plays and his ability to score the ball as well. He didn't have that explosive freshman campaign. Cameron Carr really kind of took his shine in a way where it was a little bit unexpected from Cam Carr as a junior, but with Tunde, there's still a lot of upside there. And at pick 24, where we have him in our big board, that's really good upside where, you might as well just take a play on him because of his scoring ability, because of the steals. These are guys that are very likely to provide good return of investment. And a lot of it reminds me of like a Tari Eason, right? A guy who was picked, I think, pick 20, but got some pretty good value in dynasty drafts if you were to take him like in the 16s range. But if you can get like Tunde here at 24 and he becomes a similar type player because of his good motor, tunnel vision, just like Tari Eason as well, but still a very productive fantasy player. Tunde Yesufu is a pretty fun gamble. He did enter the transfer portal, so there's definitely no guarantee that he's going to stay in the draft, but we'll have to really monitor it a little bit closely as the cycle starts to close. But with Tunde, I am intrigued. I'll just leave it at that.
Very good. All right, so let's get to the back end here. We'll close it out, just talk about one more player. We don't want to go into too much discussion of all these guys because we do have a fun collab coming up soon with other great Dynasty minds. So definitely keep an eye on our YouTube channel here for that. Subscribe if you are new, of course. Alex Karaban, Mitch. So we obviously have this scenario where we have so many of these guys returning to school. So I think as a result of that, we're going to start to see more upperclassmen drafted in the first round. Do I think Karaban will get drafted in the first round in real life? Probably not, but there might be some others, maybe like a Joshua Jefferson, for example, or like Dalen Swain, who I mentioned earlier. He's an upperclassman. You're probably going to start to see that more, but I think in general, both in fantasy and in real life, going to start to see more value to these upperclassmen, especially those who've run out of NCAA eligibility. They don't have the option to return for more NIL money like a Braylon Mullins did. Alex Karaban, someone that we have just at the very back end of first round valuation here, 29. Maybe you'll get him in the beginning of the second round. Fair game if you do. I would say maybe the biggest allure here is probably basketball IQ. I really think there's a coach that's going to like him a lot wherever it is that he gets drafted to. Again, might be a second round pick, might play a little bit in the G League first, but I think it's going to be that scenario where he's going to find a coach and win him over. I think it's going to be a team that really specifically wants the services of a player, a jumbo creator like what Caravan's capable of doing, especially if you only have to spend a second round pick to get somebody with that ability, get someone who could take care of the ball, add some size. There's a lot of upside there. What do you think about Caravan from a nine category perspective, Mitch?
Yeah, he has a very fantasy friendly game too. I mean, clean shooting splits, nearly 40% for his career from three, some hidden stock potential, almost a 1-and-1, 1 steal, 1 block type of guy. And then also, like to your point, great size, right? He could play a little bit of point forward from time to time. He was the leader for this UConn team over the last 3 or so years, and he has a winning pedigree, right? He's the winningest. Is that even a word?
Winningest? Yeah.
The winningest UConn Husky in history with 2 titles, 3 NCAA finals appearances. Alex Caravan is a straight winner. He doesn't fold under pressure. And a lot of playoff teams could use him and his cheap contract to fill out their roster, where he could play immediate minutes off the bench, right? Maybe he can carve into those some spot starting roles, right? If some star key players are injured, and this is a really fun part of the draft where in the late 20s, early 30s, those type of players that are upperclassmen, like, for example, like Andrew Nimhart, right? Didn't expect him to have the highest upside. We still had him as like a late first round grade in Dynasty. We didn't have Angle yet, but we would have discussions about Andrew Nimhart. He is a guy who can plug and play. Alex Caravan, very similar. High IQ. He could shoot. He could pass. He could play defense, similar to like a Nimhart, but on like a larger scale. Not saying he's going to have that same immediate success, but at the end of the first round, that's a pretty fun, high reward, low risk, high reward type of gamble with Alex Caravan here.
Yeah, especially in like a salary league, he's probably going to be so cheap. If he does end up being a late first or pick somewhere in the middle of the second round, that contract's going to be so nice. And that has value to real life teams. Maybe some winning team with not a lot of cap space left. Well, now they have a backup kind of jumbo point guard that they could bring off their bench to add a new layer to their offense, do some self-creation, create for others, and still have some size on the floor. So interesting conversation to be had about Caravan. But that will wrap it up for us today on our discussion for version 3 of the Big Board. Again, you can find this on anglefantasybasketball.com. All of our free content is located there. We have a Patreon if you're interested in bonus content. So check that out in the description below. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe if you are new, and we will see you all next time.